Five Nights at Freddy's 3 seems like a fairly straightforward game in terms of story and general lore. William Afton, renowned baby eater, gets himself killed inside of the very suit he had worn to do the same thing to innocent children for years. He is then sealed behind a wall for 3 whole decades, before finally being released by clueless capitalists looking for props to use for their Freddy-themed horror attraction, Fazbear's Fright. In fact, this would seem like the simplest aspect of FNAF lore compared to the complex spaghettiness of the rest of the current timeline. However, in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, nothing can ever be so simple. So let's talk about it. To recap, we need to talk about when the Follow Me games take place. In FNAF 3, Phone Guy is long dead after the events of FNAF 1, and so in his place are training tapes recorded by him to teach Fazbear employees on how to use the spring suits. Keyword Fazbear, because he directly states that these tapes are for Freddy's locations.
Hello? Welcome to your new career as a performer/entertainer for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. These tapes will provide you with much-needed information on how to handle/climb into/climb out of mascot costumes. Remember to smile, you are the face of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Now, how exactly are there spring suits in Freddy Fazbear locations? Surely after the tragedies involving them that occurred at Fredbear's Family Diner, the company would have the basic business literacy to not continue using them despite their obvious safety hazards? We are aware of how much Fazbear Entertainment likes to cover up and discredit the truth, so why would they do something as unrealistic as keep Fredbear and Spring Bonnie around at Freddy Fazbear's? That's because they haven't shut down yet. Freddy Fazbear's is collaborating with Fredbear's. It's a sister location. This is why the spring suits are being used in Freddy's locations, and also why the bullies from FNAF 4 are wearing Freddy-themed masks. Freddy's was opened before Fredbear's had even shut down, likely as a way to cover up the disappearance of Charlotte that had happened the year prior on Halloween. And I know, before all the comments rally up, the books aren't canon. Charlotte dies in FNAF 2. Keep in mind that Scott Cawthon himself stated and insists that the books are canon, and that various events from both continuities can and will overlap into each other. For example, the first missing children incident in the Silver Eyes happened in 1985. We know this because the book itself takes place in 1995, where the characters meet up for a memorial for the 10th anniversary of one of the victims. This was later confirmed to be the universal year the MCI takes place in the first Fazbear Fright, Into the Pit, where Oswald finds a calendar in the pizzeria with that same year. Another example is the story 1:35 AM, where the protagonist is tormented by the Ella doll from the original novel trilogy. Its purpose in the novels was revealed to be the first robot in a series of 4 built by Henry that would be used to replicate Charlotte growing up after her death. It was used to give Charlie a form as a toddler, but was later reused as a toy for her bedroom once her consciousness was transferred to the next robot, which would represent her as a young child. Now, to clarify, this isn't the soul of the Charlotte that was murdered by William Afton, as explained in the 4th closet, but rather the agony and emotional energy emitted by Henry in the aftermath that infected a separate ragdoll also known as Ella, which he would use to power, in quotes, the Charlie robots, as well as develop the first illusion discs. This is why Circus Baby, and in all likelihood Eleanor, is able to shapeshift into different people willingly through the use of Remnant, whereas the illusion discs created by Afton Robotics are purely technological and therefore inferior, only changing an animatronic's appearance depending on how others want to perceive it. The story of 1:35 AM is also directly referenced in the Stitch Wraith Stingers, which those stories take place sometime after the FNAF 6 fire. Not only this, but the Freddy Files itself explains that Ella was originally used as a Charlie bot, then was mass-produced by Fazbear Entertainment in the lead-up to 1:35 AM. This description is not likely to be an error either. After all, the Ultimate Edition was made in response to the previous updated edition's numerous mistakes that Scott Cawthon promised to fix later on. Now, does this prove the original novels are in the same timeline as the games? No. It's been made apparent that those novels are from separate continuities. However, it does confirm that some events from the novels can be answers to missing pieces from the games, and vice versa. The soul of Charlotte in the novels likely went into the puppet like the games, who was simply somewhere else during the trilogy, perhaps already inside Lefty. As such, the Charlie bots explain the discovery of Remnant and the use of illusion discs on things like the Nightmare and the Fun Times in the games. Now, there's also a theory that the first 4 games aren't actually canon because of Tales of the Pizzaplex, but I'm just gonna let MatPat handle that one. Anyway, Freddy's was likely opened in response to the bad publicity left in the wake of Charlotte's disappearance at Fredbear's, as we know that it was established in 1983 shown by the coins in Help Wanted. The new restaurant eventually expands to multiple locations, all using their own spring suits, thus the need for employee training tapes to keep people from dying when wearing these death contraptions. We can also assume that this is the same year Fredbear's does end up closing. and is the sister location in question that Phone Guy mentions something happening at that causes the spring suits to be retired. It's most likely talking about the bite of 83, but it could be referencing any kind of employee accident regarding the suits. Note that either way, it would be natural for any props originating from Fredbear's to cease existence alongside the restaurant. So it really doesn't matter what incident in question Phone Guy is talking about in the tape. This is backed up by Phone Guy's message from FNAF 2, where he states that Fredbear's had been closed for years at the point the game takes place in 1987. The important thing is that Fredbear's and the spring suits must no longer exist before the MCI in 1985, because this is also when the safe rooms are sealed up, as they no longer have a reason to be used if the spring suits are being retired. It's also pretty obvious Fazbear Entertainment doesn't want the room to be used for any other purpose, which Phone Guy explains.
The safe room is reserved for equipment and/or other property not being currently used and as a backup safety location for employees only. This is not a break room.
This means that William Afton could not have been springtrapped until after FNAF 2, as he would be unable to commit the 2 MCIs that occur at their respective Freddys in years 85 and 87. Not to mention that he's springtrapped because he's being chased by the victims from the first MCI. The tapes imply that Afton had been snooping around, hence the reminder not to take customers in the safe rooms, as well as the moving of Spring Bonnie, but nothing else. If anything, this would explain the backstory of Andrew from the Fazbear Frights and that he was the forgotten customer Afton had taken back and murdered. Basically, the events we hear about in FNAF 3 do not relate to Springtrap whatsoever. I'm aware that this makes no sense as to why the safe room was wide open in the Follow Me minigames, but just hear me out. Listen to what Phone Guy says when talking about the safe rooms.
Hello. This is just to inform all employees that due to budget restrictions, the previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one.
Most locations. Most. At this point, Freddy's isn't just a singular restaurant like Fredbear's. It's a franchise. There are several different Freddy's when these tapes were made and when Fredbear's closes. This could explain oddities like the various different designs between Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Scrap Trap, Nightmare Fredbear, purple clothing, black clothing. These are all just weird differences between the suits at various locations. Similarly to how real-life Chuck E. Cheese's have different appearances for the robots depending on which one you go to. The use of most locations and the phrase including this one are not accidental. It's explaining what would be a safe room paradox. The Freddy's these tapes are being recorded at is simply a different Freddy's from the one the MCI happens at and that Afton dies in. That just begs the question, if the company order didn't seal Springtrap, who did? Okay, this is the part of the video where I start to complain. Beaverseal is not true. If you aren't aware, Beaverseal has been a fairly popular theory within the community for a while now, and it's been on the rise again recently. It's the idea that at some point after William Afton was spring-locked, a family of beavers broke into the Freddy's and started constructing a dam over the doorway of the safe room, thus being what seals Springtrap for the next 30 years. I don't even understand how this theory was thought up. It's up there with Gregbot in terms of baselessness. First off, beavers do not hibernate. There would be no reason for them to enter an abandoned pizzeria of all places to do something they literally never do. The point of including rain in the minigames was to show how the suit had gone off in the first place. We know that Afton is savvy when it comes to operating Spring Bonnie safely, and he seemed very confident in the minigames, laughing and all. It was the rain falling through the ceiling that moistened the spring locks which caused the failure to happen. We also don't see a stream of water flowing through the doorway to the safe room, by the way, so I don't understand how some people theorized the beavers followed one to build a dam over. Scott Cawthon wasn't at his desk thinking, how do I show the player that beavers would eventually build a dam sealing Springtrap without making it obvious? I got it, I'll have it be raining. Even if that was the case, a high enough water level that would warrant sealing the entire room off is way too unrealistic, and has had no mention or reference in any other piece of lore in the whole series. Beavers themselves have not made a single appearance in any book, and I know, L-Chip and Chipper are characters, and that's an actual talking point people make saying that it's some sort of agony ironic plot device thing where William Afton gets betrayed by the animals of one of his robotic creations. But come on, both are just supposed to be references to Scott's failed game that gave him the idea for FNAF in the first place. They don't serve any actual lore importance. William Afton has to have been Springtrap between the events of the second Freddy's that we play at in FNAF 2 and the FNAF 1 Freddy's. Phone Guy's calls calling it a summer job gives the idea that the restaurant was first opened in the summer, but was closed down until when you play in November. It would then make sense if William Afton struck during the summer, which led to the building going on lockdown and closing, then leaving to destroy the original animatronics for their remnant after being sent back to the abandoned location. If he was able to, he would have likely killed again in the November reopening, and the final time in FNAF 1. but we never hear of anything after the summer phone calls. This would also explain why he tells Michael to go down to circus rentals. He is preoccupied with getting the original robots, otherwise he would just do it himself. Michael then gets scooped and would go looking for his father for answers, but wouldn't know that he'd been killed and trapped in the safe room during Michael's work week, which is why Michael begins working at Freddy's locations in the first place, specifically starting at FNAF 2 if we are to believe he is the protagonist of every game, as that would be the only one open at the time. It's highly likely that at one point, Michael would have searched the abandoned Freddy's Springtrap as in, but would only come across a bunch of animatronic debris and a flat wall where there used to be a door, something he wouldn't know about in the first place because it's hidden to regular non-employees. And Michael only begins working at FNAF 2, a restaurant that wouldn't even need safe rooms. Do you really think he would see a floor-to-ceiling wall of scrap logs and sticks and not think it as suspicious? The security logbook is an in-universe company-issued handbook that we're led to believe was owned by Michael Afton at one point. Both his name and his own writings can be found throughout the book, as well as drawings he'd made referencing past FNAF games he's experienced. If there was any perfect time to include a drawing of a beaver or any other hint to this event being canon, which the logbook has sneaked in several lore hints already, it would be in here, yet it isn't. Alright, I think I got a lot of my gripes out. I just get really passionate about this series sometimes, so I'm sorry you just had to see me nerd rant over a theory about a scary bear game. In all likelihood, I would think someone like Henry was the one to seal Springtrap away. He's been shown in things such as the Fourth Closet and the Bear of Vengeance cutscenes in UCN to be at constant war with William Afton trying to stop his plans. He also was the one who orchestrated the FNAF 6 fire, as genius as that was, thus he probably was the culprit of the FNAF 3 fire as well. Sealing the safe room would just be another scheme in keeping Afton down. It could have been Michael too, but I doubt he would know how to build part of a wall. Plus he already has his purpose in the story, whereas Henry is more of a secondary rival character to William. We also see Henry do a similar thing with Circus Baby in the novels, in which he seals the robot in his own house, and shares identical goals to his game counterpart of wanting people to forget about Freddy's. It just fits thematically and makes way more sense than Springtrap getting boarded up by a random colony of beavers we never hear from again. But that's just my thoughts on it. What do you guys think? Leave your theories in the comments below and I'll try to read as many as I can. And if you're someone who actually believes in Beaverseal, let me know why. As always, have a good day. I'll see you in the next vid.